In the shadowy corners of American literature, one name stands out: Edgar Allan Poe. A master of the macabre, Poe's haunting tales and poignant poetry delve into the depths of the human psyche. Yet, behind the genius lay a life fraught with tragedy, struggle, and misrepresentation. As we unravel the complexities of his existence, we invite you to explore the enigmatic world of Poe, a realm where fear, beauty, and creativity intertwine. Join us on this journey to uncover the true essence of the men behind the legend. Before we dive into the dark and captivating world of Edgar Allan Poe, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more intriguing content. Share this documentary with fellow literature lovers who crave to explore the mysteries of the human mind. Your support helps us bring more stories to life. Now, let's embark on this journey into the life and legacy of a true literary icon. The mysterious circumstances surrounding Edgar Allan Poe's death on October 7, 1849, continue to intrigue historians, particularly concerning the cause of his demise and the events leading up to it. Poe was discovered in a state of delirium and disarray at a Baltimore tavern on October 3, where he sought assistance from magazine editor Joseph E. Snodgrass. He was subsequently taken to Washington College Hospital for treatment of apparent intoxication. Remarkably, he had no visitors during his hospitalization and offered no explanation for his condition before passing away on October 7 at the age of 40. Much of what is known about Poe's final days comes from his attending physician, John Joseph Moran, whose credibility is often questioned. Poe was laid to rest after a modest funeral at Westminster Hall and Burying Ground, but in 1875, his remains were moved to a new grave featuring a larger monument, which also honors his wife, Virginia, and mother-in-law, Maria. Numerous theories have emerged regarding the cause of Poe's death, including suicide, murder, cholera, hypoglycemia, rabies, syphilis, influenza, brain tumor, and the possibility that he fell victim to coping. The claim that alcohol played a significant role remains a topic of dispute. Following Poe's passing, Rufus Wilmot Griswold penned his obituary under the pseudonym Ludwig. Griswold, who became Poe's literary executor, was a known rival and later published a biography portraying Poe as a depraved, intoxicated madman. It is widely believed that Griswold fabricated much of this negative depiction, and although Poe's friends condemned it, this portrayal left a lasting impression on public perception. Poe spent the summer of 1849 in Richmond, where he explored a potential magazine venture, arriving with lingering effects from what he described as a cholera attack, marked by hallucinations and adamant claims of sobriety. He recuperated sufficiently to deliver well-received lectures and readings to cover his expenses before leaving on September 27 for New York City, intending to pursue an editorial position and remarry. There is no reliable information about his activities until October 3, when he was discovered in a delirious state at Ryan's Tavern, also known as Gunner's Hall, in Baltimore. A printer, Joseph W. Walker, sent a letter seeking help for Poe, describing him as rather the worse for wear and in great distress. Snodgrass later claimed the note stated that Poe was in a state of beastly intoxication. Snodgrass vividly described Poe's appearance as repulsive, with unkempt hair, a haggard, unwashed face, and lusterless and vacant eyes. His clothing, including a dirty shirt and ill-fitting shoes, appeared worn and tattered. Moran, Poe's attending physician, offered a detailed description, noting a stained, old coat, similar pantaloons, worn-out shoes, and a shabby straw hat. Poe was never coherent long enough to explain his condition, and it is believed that the clothes he wore did not belong to him, as such shabby attire was uncharacteristic for him. Moran treated Poe at Washington College Hospital, where he was denied visitors and confined to a room resembling a jail cell, designed for those inebriated. It is said that Poe repeatedly called out the name Reynolds the night before he died, though the identity of this individual remains elusive. One possibility is Jeremiah N. Reynolds, a newspaper editor who may have inspired Poe's novel, The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. Alternatively, Poe might have been referencing Henry R. Reynolds, a judge from the 4th Ward polls at Ryan's Tavern, or perhaps Herring, in reference to an uncle-in-law in Baltimore. Moran later mentioned a visit from a Mrs. Herring, suggesting some confusion. He claimed to have attempted to lift Poe's spirits during one of the rare moments when he was awake, to which Poe supposedly replied that the best thing his friend could do would be to blow out his brains with a pistol. In his distressed state, Poe mentioned a wife in Richmond. He may have been delusional, mistakenly believing that his wife, Virginia Eliza Clem Poe, was alive, or he might have referred to Sarah Elmira Royster, to whom he had recently proposed. Unbeknownst to him, his trunk, containing his belongings, had been left behind at the Swan Tavern in Richmond. Moran reported that Poe's last words were a plea, "Lord, help my poor soul," before he passed away on October 7, 1849. Moran's credibility has been repeatedly called into question, given that he likely was the only person to see Poe in his final days. Over the years, his accounts changed as he wrote and spoke on the subject. He claimed to have immediately contacted Poe's aunt and mother-in-law to inform them of his death, although he actually wrote to her only after she requested information nearly a month later. He also recounted a poetic last statement from Poe, which many have deemed implausible. The editor of the New York Herald, who published Moran's version, noted the unlikelihood of Poe articulating such complex phrases, even in delirium. Poe biographer William Bigner suggests that Moran's attribution of grandiose last words may have stemmed from a tradition of assigning pious remarks to console mourners. Moran's accounts contained inconsistencies regarding dates as well. At various times, he claimed Poe arrived at the hospital on October 3rd, October 6th, or even on October 7th at 10 o'clock in the afternoon. Despite stating he had hospital records to support his claims, a century later, a search found no such documentation. Critics argue that Moran's inaccuracies may have resulted from a faulty memory or a desire to romanticize the tale, particularly as he was 65 when he published his final account. The exact cause of Poe's death remains a matter of dispute, with all medical records, including his death certificate, reportedly lost. Various theories have emerged, with biographers offering differing conclusions, ranging from hypoglycemia to conspiracy theories surrounding murder. Some suggest that depression may have driven Poe to suicide. In 1848, he nearly succumbed to an overdose of laudanum. While the nature of that incident remains ambiguous, it did not lead to his death a year later. A psychological analysis conducted in 2020 suggested that Poe experienced a major depressive episode near the end of his life, making suicide a possibility. However, evidence of suicidal tendencies was inconsistent in his professional writings, leading researchers to conclude that while depression likely influenced his demise, suicide seemed improbable. Snodgrass was firmly convinced that Poe succumbed to alcoholism, and he worked tirelessly to promote this notion, finding Poe a compelling example for his temperance movement efforts. However, subsequent evaluations of Snodgrass's claims revealed them to be unreliable. Moran, in his 1885 account, countered Snodgrass by asserting that Poe was not under the influence of any intoxicant at the time of his death, noting that Poe had not the slightest odor of liquor upon his breath or person. Nevertheless, several newspapers of the era reported Poe's death as congestion of the brain or cerebral inflammation, which were euphemisms for deaths associated with shameful causes like alcoholism. A psychologist studying Poe even suggested he suffered from dipsomania. The portrayal of Poe as a chronic alcoholic is contentious. His drinking companion, Thomas Mayne Reid, acknowledged that they participated in wild escapades but insisted that Poe never went beyond the innocent mirth in which we all indulge. Reid admitted that while acknowledging this as one of Poe's shortcomings, he could attest that it was not habitual. Some suggest that Poe had a heightened sensitivity to alcohol and could become inebriated after just one glass of wine. His drinking reportedly fluctuated, only indulging during challenging times and sometimes going months without alcohol. Adding to the confusion, Poe was a member of the Sons of Temperance when he died, and the temperance community believed he had not violated his pledge. The suggestion of a drug overdose has also been disproven, although it persists in some narratives. Thomas Dunn English, a known adversary of Poe and a trained physician, maintained that Poe did not use drugs, stating that he would have noticed any signs of such during their frequent encounters. Over the years, various other potential causes of death have emerged, including rare brain diseases, brain tumors, diabetes, enzyme deficiencies, syphilis, apoplexy, delirium tremens, epilepsy, and meningeal inflammation. Dr. John W. Francis, who examined Poe in May 1848, believed he had heart disease, which Poe later denied. A 2006 analysis of a sample of Poe's hair found no evidence of lead or mercury poisoning. Cholera was also considered since Poe traveled through Philadelphia during an epidemic and reported severe illness while there. Because Poe was discovered on Election Day, speculation arose as early as 1872 that he fell victim to cooping, a scheme involving kidnapping individuals off the streets by local election gangs for fraudulent voting. This method would explain Poe's disheveled appearance when found, though his recognition in Baltimore may have made him an unlikely target for such a plot. In a 1996 article published in the Maryland Medical Journal, cardiologist R. Michael Benitez proposed that Poe's death was likely caused by rabies, potentially contracted from a pet. Indicators supporting this hypothesis included Poe's delirium and difficulty drinking water during hospitalization, a symptom known as hydrophobia, commonly associated with rabies. Poe's funeral was a modest affair held at 4 p.m. on October 8, 1849, in Baltimore, attended by only a handful of mourners. Poe's uncle, Henry Herring, provided a simple mahogany coffin, while a cousin, Neilson Poe, supplied the hearse. The shroud was made by Moran's wife. The service was officiated by Reverend W. T. D. Clem, a cousin of Poe's wife Virginia, with attendants from Snodgrass, attorney Zacchaeus Collins Lee, Poe's cousin Elizabeth Herring and her husband, and former schoolmaster Joseph Clark. The ceremony was brief, lasting only 3 minutes amid cold, damp weather. Reverend Clem opted against delivering a sermon due to the small crowd. Sexton George W. Spence described the day as dark and gloomy, noting it was neither raining nor sunny. Poe was interred at Westminster Presbyterian Churchyard in a bare coffin without handles, a nameplate, cloth lining, or cushioning for his head. On October 10, 2009, Poe was honored with a second funeral in Baltimore, featuring actors portraying his contemporaries and other historical figures, each delivering eulogies inspired by their writings about him. The event included a replica of Poe's casket and a wax effigy. Poe was reburied on November 17, 1875, with a new monument. The remains of his wife, Virginia, and mother-in-law, Maria, were also laid to rest there. Originally, Poe was buried without a headstone, marked only by a sandstone block labeled number 80. An Italian marble headstone intended for his grave was destroyed in a train derailment before it reached its destination. In 1873, Southern poet Paul Hamilton Hayne, after visiting Poe's grave, published an article lamenting its poor state and calling for a proper monument. Sarah Sigourney Rice, a Baltimore schoolteacher, raised funds through public performances by her elocution students, garnering contributions from many, including Philadelphia publisher George William Childs, who provided the final $650 needed for the new monument designed by architect George A. Frederick. The completed monument, featuring a medallion of Poe by artist Adelbert Valk, cost slightly more than $1,500, approximately $39,700 in 2023. Poe was reinterred on October 1, 1875, in a more prominent location near the front of the church. A celebration accompanied the dedication of the new tomb on November 17th, with Neilson Poe delivering a speech praising his cousin as one of the best-hearted men that ever lived. Among the invited guests, only Walt Whitman attended, while Alfred Tennyson contributed a poem that was recited during the ceremony. Unbeknownst to the crew handling Poe's reburial, the headstones in the cemetery had been turned to face the west gate in 1864, complicating their efforts to locate the correct grave. Initially, they unearthed the remains of a 19-year-old Maryland militiaman before finally identifying Poe's coffin, which revealed an intact skull, easily recognizable by the distinct shape of his forehead. A few years later, Virginia's remains were also relocated to this site after the cemetery where she was buried was demolished. With no relatives to claim her, her bones were gathered by William Gill, an early biographer of Poe, who stored them in a box under his bed. Virginia was finally interred alongside her husband on January 19, 1885, coinciding with the 76th anniversary of Poe's birth, nearly a decade after the erection of his current monument. Spence, who had overseen Poe's original burial and later exhumation and reburial, was present for the ceremony that reunited Poe with Virginia and her mother, Maria Clem. On October 9th, the day of Poe's burial, the New York Tribune published an obituary signed simply Ludwig. This piece dramatically swung between praising Poe's literary brilliance and condemning his temperament and ambition. Ludwig claimed that literary art lost one of its most brilliant, but erratic stars, yet also painted a picture of Poe wandering the streets in delirium, muttering to himself. He depicted Poe as excessively arrogant, convinced that all men were villains, and quick to anger. This Ludwig was later identified as Rufus Wilmot Griswold, a former colleague who had a history of disparaging Poe. Even while Poe was alive, Griswold had engaged in character assassination against him. Much of the obituary's content was almost verbatim from the fictional character Frances Vivian in Edward Bulwer Lytton's The Caxtons. This portrayal quickly became the prevailing image of Poe. Griswold also claimed that Poe had appointed him as his literary executor. While he had served as an agent for several American authors, the circumstances of his appointment remain murky. It's unclear whether Poe genuinely chose him or if Griswold tricked or misled Poe's aunt and mother-in-law, Maria. In 1850, he collaborated with James Russell Lowell and Nathaniel Parker Willis to publish a collection of Poe's work that included a biographical article titled Memoir of the Author. This piece depicted Poe as a depraved, intoxicated madman, with many of its claims thought to be fabrications by Griswold. Those who had known Poe, including Sarah Helen Whitman, Charles Frederick Briggs, and George Rex Graham, vehemently denounced this account. Despite its inaccuracies, it gained acceptance because it was the only comprehensive biography available, leading many to assume Poe mirrored his dark fictional creations or to revel in the idea of reading the works of an evil man. It wasn't until John Henry Ingram's biography in 1875 that a more accurate portrayal of Poe emerged. Nonetheless, historians continue to rely on Griswold's distorted representation in their own biographies, including those by W. H. Davenport in 1880, Thomas R. Slicer in 1909, and Augustus Hopkins Strong in 1916, often using Poe as a cautionary tale about the dangers of alcohol and drugs. In 1941, Arthur Hobson Quinn presented evidence that Griswold had forged and altered several of Poe's letters included in his Memoir of the Author. By that time, Griswold's image of Poe was deeply embedded in the public consciousness, both in America and internationally, and this distorted portrayal has become part of the Poe legend, persisting despite efforts to correct it. As we conclude our exploration of Edgar Allan Poe's life and legacy, it's essential to reflect on the profound impact he has had on literature and culture. Despite the shadowy portrayals crafted by Rufus Wilmot Griswold and others, Poe's genius shines through the fog of misrepresentation. Poe's tales of mystery, horror, and the macabre have captivated readers for generations, inviting them into a world where the boundaries of reality and imagination blur. His innovative contributions to the genres of horror and detective fiction have inspired countless authors and filmmakers, cementing his place as a pioneer of American literature. Though his life was marked by personal struggles and public misinterpretation, Poe's work continues to resonate, reminding us that brilliance often comes with complexity. The stories of his resilience, creativity, and tragic fate serve as a testament to the enduring power of art. As we revisit the haunting beauty of Poe's poetry and the chilling suspense of his narratives, we honor not just the men but the legacy he left behind. In a world that often seeks to define and confine, Poe invites us to embrace the unknown, to explore the depths of our fears, and to celebrate the imagination's limitless possibilities. Let us remember Poe not only as a tortured soul but as a visionary whose work encourages us to confront our darkest thoughts and discover beauty in the shadows. As we close this chapter on Poe's life, may we continue to find inspiration in his words, exploring the delicate dance between light and darkness that defines the human experience.